I keep hearing about peaceful protests. I hear it about everything. And then I come into an area like this and I see the town is burned down. I mean,
well, those peaceful protests caused a lot of damages in places like Kenosha. Buildings were completely burned down. President Trump spoke with business owners who are forced to rebuild from scratch after looting and rioting destroyed their livelihood. The left continues to blame the president for the violence without any solutions to the problem. To discuss this further, let's bring in the former acting U.S. Attorney General, Matt Whitaker. Matt, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be with you, Sean.
Matt, you know, obviously so much to talk about here, but the thing that I find fascinating, the president's in Kenosha yesterday. You've played at the highest levels of the Justice Department. What's the role of the federal government when it comes to these local and state-based riots?
Yeah, and I think you mean the fiery but mostly peaceful protests
yes,
that are
apologies.
But I think, the federal government plays an important role, but as some have said, the federal government is more 912 and not 911. Look, the state and local law enforcement have the principal role, and they can be supported oftentimes by the National Guard, where these governors should be calling them in. And you see in Kenosha, for example, that they got control of that after everyone started working together with all the resources. You see the exact opposite in Portland, where it continues for, I think, 94, 95 nights to be out of control. Riots are being declared almost on a nightly basis. And, this is the failure of political leadership by mayors and governors that really, I guess, would rather try to win an election than to help their people and keep their people safe.
Hi, Matt. The president has talked a lot about this. He's offered the National Guard to the Portland mayor. They have not taken the president up on the offer. And as you said, we're approaching 100 nights in Portland. So why doesn't the president invoke the Insurrection Act? What's keeping him from doing that?
Well, I think fundamentally these always work better when the feds are invited in, especially the National Guard, and that they can work in concert. If they're not coordinating, especially in Portland, where you have the mayor is also the essentially police commissioner, and where you have that situation, if you're not coordinating very closely with those federal resources, it could go very bad. And so, for me, I think the solution is very simple. You employ the Kenosha model, and that's what the mayor should do. But for some reason, these left-wing Democrats do not want to bring law and order to their community. They'd rather have these fiery, mostly peaceful protests continue for their political benefit. I don't think ultimately it's going to help them the way they think it does.
But if it continues, is there a point that the president's going to have to do the Insurrection Act, that he's going to have to step in and do that? Or does he just let this keep going?
Yeah, I would have to say that the responsibility of this is not on the president. He's not letting this keep going. The mayor and the governor in Oregon and in Portland are the ones that are letting this keep going. Now, that being said, is this president, as well as I know him, and I know Sean knows him well as well, he's not going to sit by and let this happen. He is, I'm sure, asking Bill Barr and others to figure out a way that we can stop what is happening in Portland. And ultimately, I think that he is very sensitive. He doesn't want to cause a provocation and cause more violence. But at the same time, the taxpayers in Portland and in Oregon deserve law and order just like everybody else.
Matt, there's a lot of speculation going around that a lot of this protesting and rioting is an organized and funded group, right? And so the question I have is it appropriate for the Department of Justice to look into this? We saw the other day, for example, that most of the arrests in Kenosha weren't people from Kenosha or even Wisconsin. They were from out of state. And so the question is it appropriate for something like the Department of Justice to look into whether or not this effort is being funded by an outside entity? Only because, and I want to be clear, it's one thing to fund people who want to protest, but if they're going there for the sole reason of rioting and looting and breaking and vandalizing, then you're actually funding an illegal activity. So in that case, where's the line between what DOJ can and cannot investigate?
Yeah, you're right, Sean. And I think based on recent comments from the vice president and Bill Barr, I do believe that there are an active investigation, obviously not into the protected First Amendment constitutional rights that every citizen that wants to protest peacefully can exercise. But I think it's looking into things like these shipments of gas masks and fireworks that were intercepted on its way to Kenosha. What is happening with the core 100 to 200 people every night in Portland showing up. I mean, obviously these things are organized, and if there is a funding mechanism sitting behind these acts of vandalism and violence, then I think the Department of Justice is looking into that. I think they'll actually come out with a pretty good investigation that will bring those accountable for these fires and these explosions and all of the chaos we're seeing in some of these cities. I think they'll hold some people accountable for those violent acts.
Speaking of investigations, Matt, I do want to switch gears a bit and ask you about the Durham investigation. You spent time, you were the acting attorney general at the Department of Justice. Everybody's wondering what's going on. I mean, why haven't we seen more arrests from John Durham and Bill Barr as a result of this investigation? And, we're only about 60 days out from the election, and a lot of the base is wondering why we're not seeing more action.
No, and everywhere I go, people ask me, that's one of the primary questions, is when is somebody going to be held accountable? Obviously, Mr. Klein-Smith, who was the attorney at the FBI that falsified some documents, I think he's pled guilty. I'm led to believe that John Durham does have other targets that have committed crimes. I think we all know the names of people that we want to see held accountable. And I think John Durham and Bill Barr are unafraid, ultimately, if the facts and the evidence lead that way, to prosecute whoever can be prosecuted. And I think ultimately it's not happening as quickly as many, including myself, would like to see. But at the same time, I do believe that Bill Barr is going to get to the bottom of it. We'll have a full accounting, and anybody that can be held criminally responsible will be.
Matt, I do appreciate you coming on again and sharing your thoughts. There's a lot to break down here. And as this report gets closer, I hope we can have you back and get an update.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
All right, appreciate that. Still to come tonight, one of the standout speeches at the RNC last week was by the father of a young girl who died in the Parkland school shooting. Coming up, he's here to tell us what needs to be done to keep kids safe. Stay tuned.